All right, so recently I put a very small lift on the Tacoma. It is basically the Bilstein 5100s and the OME springs, but it has an add a leaf in the back. One of the things that I noticed initially when I put it on is the back set up really high, and I think that's because I didn't take out the overload springs. And I also had some vibration. So one of the first things I did was I kind of spaced down the carrier bearing. I'll show you that here in a second. But I still had some vibration, and so I decided that I needed to kind of like look into it a little bit more. And also I decided that I was gonna take out those overload springs to see how it sat. I'll show you here a comparison of before and after. I think it looks much better. I did keep the overload springs just in case, because I am planning on building some drawers for the back, and so I'm not really sure if over time they're gonna sag or if the weight's gonna bring it down. So I decided to keep them just in case they need to go back in there later. So here are those overload springs. Like I said, I'm just gonna hang on to them. But today, primarily what we're gonna be working on is trying to get some of the driveline vibrations out because there's some pretty bad angles with the drive shafts. I'll show you what those look like here in a second. So just kind of talk about what I'm gonna be using. I've got these magnetized washers. They are from like a Unistrut kit. And so they will work just perfect to kind of stack. We can kind of experiment with how many we need to stack to get that carrier bearing down. I think Old Man Emu does sell a kit, but I had these, so I figured that they'll work. I did pick up some different kind of shims to go underneath the axle and the pad on the springs. And this is going to help get my pinion up because, as you'll see here in a second, the Tacoma pinion is really flat. And then since I had to already cut off the 3 bolts for the leaf pack, I got a new set of those. And of course, these are really long, but I'll cut them down. Okay, so kind of looking under the truck, you'll see what I mean. We've got the pinion that's relatively flat. It is up a little bit, pretty sharp angle right there. However, this one's pretty bad coming off of the carrier bearing headed down. And then you can see, of course, the front drive shaft going to the transfer case. I don't necessarily know if this was a one-piece drive shaft, if it would be as bad. But because it is a 2-piece and because this back shaft is pretty short, it doesn't have a lot of room to make up that angle. And so that's why we're getting a big angle there and a big angle there. And like I said, it is causing some vibration. And so I want to try to get this as good as we can get it. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to measure all of these angles, kind of write them down. I have an app that I'll show you, as well as a website I'll show you for calculating all of this. And then I think we'll start with spacing down the carrier bearing to see if we can get this angle a little bit better without that angle becoming too bad there coming out of the transfer case. And then at that point, we will move on to putting the shims in to see if we can fix that angle a little bit. I don't think that we're gonna get to ideal, but anything we do is gonna be better than where it's at. Okay, so the first angle that I'm gonna measure is gonna be right there from the flat spot of that flange for the U-bolt coming out of the transfer case. I'm actually going to use my phone and hold it up there, try to get it as close as to flat on that flange as possible. And I'm gonna record that one. And then the next one I'm gonna I'm gonna record the actual drive shaft and the angle it sits at. It's really important that you don't switch sides. So you start from the front and you work your way to the back and you stay on the same side so you don't get confused. So I'm gonna start with that angle, write it down. I'm going to measure the drive shaft, write it down. I'm going to measure the next drive shaft, write it down. And then I'm gonna measure the pinion angle and write it down. And then I'll plug all of those into a website and we'll look at where those are at so we can see what kind of adjustments we need to make. All right, so here is the app that we're looking at here. I'm gonna go ahead and unlock this. Now you're not gonna be able to see what I'm doing because I have to have my phone. And I'm holding it up against the flange right now. The nice thing about this is Once you've got it still, hold it there for a second. That little red lock closes and you get your angle. Now, because I have the phone sideways, we're not gonna use that number in the middle. We're actually gonna look up at the top left-hand corner where it's got that 90-degree conversion. And so we see that the angle coming out of the transfer case is at negative 3.7 degrees. And so we'll write that one down and we'll come back to it later here in just a second. All right, so I'm gonna unlock this again, and I'm gonna hold this up to my drive shaft against the flat part of my phone. Yes, I'm enjoying that, thank you. All right, I'm holding it up to the drive shaft now. I'm gonna wait until it locks. All right, and again, we're ignoring that number in the middle. We're actually looking at that number to the left. You'll see that is negative 4.2. So we're already kind of starting to slope down a little bit. All right, now we're gonna move on to, I'm gonna unlock this. Let me go write this down real quick. So now I'm gonna unlock it again, and I'm gonna hold it up to the drive shaft again, wait till it locks. And you'll see that this one's pretty bad. We're ignoring that middle number, and we're looking at the top left, and you see that it's a negative 12.1 degrees. We'll talk about this in a minute, but you want each angle that's kind of next to each other to be no more than 3 degrees off. All right, so we're going to unlock this again, and I'm gonna do my best to hold this really still here. And all right, try to hold that really still. It's gonna lock, and it looks like my pinion in the back is going to be negative 2.7. So I'm gonna write all these numbers down, and then we're gonna throw them into a calculator real quick and see how bad this is. Okay, so here is the website, spicerparts.com. You can look it up, just look up the Driveline angle calculator. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come down here and we're gonna say this is a 2-piece drive shaft, and then we're gonna put in our angles. And so this first one was negative 3.7. You don't need to put the negative, you can just tell it that it's going down. The next one was negative 4.2. And again, this one was sloped down. The next one is 12.1. And oops. Okay, and this one's gonna be sloped down. And then this last one was negative 2.7. So we're going to slope it down. Now it may look like your pinion is actually pointed up, but again, you're staying on the same side, you're going front to back, and so it's actually pointed down. And so when we look at these operating angles, you're gonna see that this first one has a 1/2 inch operating angle difference. This is well within the acceptable margin. In fact, this is what I would consider perfect difference. The second one's 7.9, so it is above the 3 degree. And so this one's not good. And then this last one is 9, again, not good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a spacer in the middle, and we're gonna see if we can improve the second number without disrupting the first number too much and getting it out of spec. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen these 2 bolts. They're 14 millimeter, and I'm gonna stack 2 of these magnetic spacers together. We're gonna throw those both in there on both sides, and then we're gonna remeasure the angles and see if this angle is still fine, and if that angle is improved. And if that's fine, then we'll move on to the shims. If it goes too far out, then we may come back and take one of them out and see where we end up there. Okay, so let's get going on that. I'm gonna loosen these. Now, I would loosen both of these if I were you. And then what I would do is don't take both of them out, and then you won't have to hold up your drive shaft. Oh, that's really tight. So loosen one, take out the other. Again, do one side at a time. Do one side at a time so your drive shaft doesn't fall on your face. That would suck. I'm just gonna loosen this other side just a little bit. All right, so we got that loose enough. So I'm going to put these spacers in. Lift this up, just get it started by hand. Okay, that's in there enough. I'm gonna take out this other bolt now.
put this other side in spacer here. You know, you don't need the magnets, but it's actually kind of nice because they don't really fall out when you're moving it around. Just thought about that. Okay, now I'm gonna put these in. I'm not gonna like actually tighten them all the way yet because we're just gonna measure some angles. All right, so now we're gonna remeasure the angles, see where we're at, and see if we're still within spec. All right, so here's my first set of measurements. Here's my second. You'll notice how I crossed out this negative 3.7. You know, after I measured this one, I got 2.4. I realized that changing that carrier bearing should not have changed this value, so I went back and measured it again. One of the things you'll notice if you use any type of measurement level tool on your iPhone, you've got those buttons on the side, which I think throws it off. So I always try to use the top or the bottom surface where it's flat. And so I did that again, and I was able to confirm that that first angle coming out of the transfer case is negative 2.4. So we know also that this last one is not going to change. So right now we've got 3 degrees different there. That's fine. We've got too much here. It's definitely more than 3 and definitely more than 3. So now we're going to go shim that pinion up, and we're going to see if we can affect these last couple angles just a little bit. And then this one hopefully is going to go down a little bit with this one coming up. And so hopefully we get within the 3 degrees. I don't think we will, but we'll definitely be closer than we are right now. All right, so before I take the center pin out, I'm going to put some clamps on, hold this leaf pack together because that add leaf is not like within a band here. Oh, there goes the bump stop. You'll notice I'm using not huge C-clamps. That's because I don't need to draw them together. I just need to keep them from moving. But still, I'm gonna get these pretty tight and make sure they don't come loose here. All right, now that I've got my C-clamps on, I am ready to take this center pin out. So I'm gonna lower the jack. That should create some distance here between my axle and my leaf pack, and then we can get the center pin out and we can put the shim in with the new bolt. So let's get that done. I'll set this here, see if you can see you know, some of the separation occur, you know, as we lower the jack. Alright, not that much because it's still kind of held in there, so we'll kind of help it along there. You'll want to watch out for your brake hoses, parking lines, things like that. Obviously it's kind of resting on this parking line, but I think we'll be okay. Okay, since these are not the original bolts, they do have an Allen head underneath where the stock ones don't, but obviously there's not enough space there to get to the Allen head, so I'm just gonna use some vice grips. Will work just fine. And get those pinched on there as tight as we can. All right, so we got those pinched on, so now we're gonna take off this bolt. We do have to replace it because I already cut this one off. And since we're adding a shim, this is gonna get just a little bit thicker, so we will need a new bolt. All right. This is not super tight, so shouldn't need an impact or anything there. All right, so I'm gonna toss this. It's not gonna be reused. Make sure your C-clamps are still good. All right, and we'll take apart these vice grips.
You may have to fight this a little bit. I need to go lower my jack a little bit more. Sometimes you don't have enough gap to get this pin out. Luckily this one you do. So we're gonna keep this plate, but then, which is actually a little bit, you'll notice, this is actually probably a factory shim. So we are gonna put this back in and we're gonna add to it and see, what we can get there. All right, so I'm actually gonna stack these two shims. So it's gonna give me like another 3 degrees from what I had. And what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna point the thick ends to the back and the skinny ends to the front. And what this is gonna do is it's going to pitch the pinion up, and it's gonna give us the maximum angle up so we can try to offset that last one. All right, so let's just set those down for now, and then I'm gonna go get my new bolt. All right, so this might be slightly problematic because it's very long. It might be too long to fish up through there the way it is. I guess for really big lead packs, that might make a lot of sense. So I think what we're gonna have to do is we'll try it, but we're probably gonna have to cut it down before we can slip it in. So we'll see. Okay, so all I'm doing here is I'm just taking the bolt we just took out, and I'm just gonna add a little bit, maybe a 1/2 inch or so, make a mark. That way we know we have enough to get that new nut on there, because that plate is not any thicker than that. So let's put this in the vise and get it cut. All right, it's always a good idea to make sure that nut's gonna start before you get too much further after you cut that thing, because you might need to clean the threads up a little bit. I think that's probably gonna start good enough. So we're gonna go ahead and cut the second one to the same length after we make sure that this fits and it's not too short, and then we'll get moving. Started through there, and then kind of finagle this until you can get it started. You may have to kind of move things around, force that down. All right, I think that's gonna give us enough room. Gonna make sure that is still facing the correct way in terms of those shims right there. We're gonna get this nut started, and then like the other one, we're gonna clamp on to this because there's no Allen head on these ones that came from whatever lift company that was. So we're gonna clamp onto this, tighten this nut down. I'm gonna put a washer on there first, and then we'll move on. We are straight there. All right, so I'm gonna grab these, clamp this down, and let's see if we can get this just a little tighter. I'm sure there's a torque value here, but I don't know what it is. So we got that cut off, bump stop now fits flush. So we're gonna go get our U-bolts and put this side back in, and then we'll move on to the next side. Okay, so I've got it touching here. I've got a little bit of pressure on it. I've seen a lot of people, they wanna get ratchet straps and all kinds of crazy stuff to get this to align. Really, the only thing you got to do is kick it. So we're going to kick it to try to get it to line up front to back, and then we'll basically just hit the leaf spring with our hand and it should pop in. All right, so there it is, just a kick and a push. Make sure you just have enough pressure on your jack. You don't need a ratchet strap, it'll go in. All right, so now we're gonna put our U-bolts on. I gotta put my bump stop on first. Now, I'm going back to the factory U-bolts. You know, the last ones that I got were kind of cheap, didn't really like them. But I had to get longer ones because I put the addle leaf and left the overload spring in. But now that I took out that overload spring, I'm back to basically the same height. So even with the shim, these should work. So we're gonna go back to the factory ones. Okay, so I just got them on there. If you'll look down here, there's still, there's still a bit of a gap underneath this plate and the axle, again, because it has not rotated up yet because the other side isn't done. So I've got this just kind of loosely held together. We're gonna go do the other side, and then we should be able to draw all this together and be good to go. I got this for my wife, originally for gardening. I have found that this is awesome. I'm almost 40, turned 40 here in a couple weeks, and knees don't feel as good as they used to, and so being able to kneel down on one of these on concrete is awesome. So Home Depot, pretty cheap, good investment. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of running them in cross pattern by eye, trying to make sure I get kind of equal amount of threads on each one of those U-bolts coming out of the nut. Once I get it there, then I'll give it some of the ugga-duggas and get it tight. Shock bolts back on. So a little tip here, let me show you. So you'll notice here that this is not going to line up right with where it needs to go on this mount. And so rather than, I see some people get like a jack and try to compress the shock. Don't do that. Just jack up your rear end until it lines up. Do it a couple times if you need to. Take your time, and it goes in pretty easy. So. All right, so real quick, I'm just gonna kind of look around, kind of mentally go through everything, make sure I got everything tightened down. I'm gonna torque down these U-bolts real quick. Then we'll throw the wheels on, torque those down, and then we're going to remeasure and see if we got where we needed to be. So I'll see you guys in a second. All right, so now we're gonna see if we made any difference here. So let's go under and measure, see where we're at, write down our figures, and run it through the calculator, see if we got any closer. Okay, let's take a look here. Results are in. Stayed the same, of course, 2.4. I got 5.0. I mean, this iPhone's not exactly perfect. Looks like I did improve a little bit in the third and dramatically in that last one with those shims. I think there's a possibility I had that shim in, the factory shim in backwards, which probably didn't help me. But I think this is actually pretty good, probably as close as we're gonna get. So let's go look at it. All right, so we're gonna select two drive shafts. This first one was 2.4 headed down. This next one was 5.0 headed down. This next one was
9.7, headed down. And then this last one was 7.8, headed down. Man, that is much better. So, I think obviously ideally you want the first angle to be the same as the second. But considering there's no way that's going to happen in this configuration with that lift, really we want to be within 3 degrees, but we're a whole heck of a lot closer than we were. All right, so, the first one looks good. Second one's outside of 3 degrees, but 4.7 is a whole heck of a lot closer than it was. Last one certainly within 3 degrees. So we're gonna get cleaned up, go test drive it. Vibrations should be gone.
Crazy.